The ground shook with every impact, and the medic everyone called Doc could barely hear her own breath over the chaos. Bullets tore through the sandbags. The men around her shouted for more ammo, for covering fire, for something, anything, to hold the line. She had never been trained to pull a trigger like this. Not in the way they needed now. She was here to save lives, not take them. But in that instant, with the barricade collapsing and the enemy pressing closer, the Navy SEAL commander turned to her, his eyes steady, and handed her his Barrett, .50 caliber rifle. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around the weapon's cold frame. The weight was staggering, almost crushing. She wasn't supposed to be here, not like this. She was just a medic, the one who patched wounds, whispered comfort to the dying, and prayed that her hands were steady enough to stop the bleeding. But now, with men she'd treated lying in the dust around her, their lives depending on what she did next, she realized there was no such thing as just a medic. The commander's voice cut through the madness, calm yet unyielding. You're the last line. Don't think, just breathe. And then he turned, rallying his men, leaving her with the rifle and a decision that weighed heavier than the weapon itself. She thought she'd never fire a gun in combat. She was wrong. The world seemed to slow. Dust swirled like smoke in the orange light. Her heart thundered as she spotted movement along the ridge, shadows advancing, rifles raised. For a moment doubt consumed her. She was a healer. Was she about to cross a line she could never step back from? But then she remembered the boy she couldn't save last winter. His chest had caved in, his hand clutching hers as he whispered for his mother. She had sworn then that if fate ever put her in a position to save another life, even by unconventional means, she would not hesitate. Her chest rose with new strength, and she pressed her cheek against the scope. The recoil slammed into her shoulder as the first shot rang out. The Barrett roared like thunder, echoing across the canyon. The figure on the ridge collapsed. For a split second, silence rippled across the battlefield. Then the SEALs erupted with renewed energy, their morale surging as if her single act had breathed life back into their fight. She fired again, and again. Each round echoed with a grim rhythm, her hands steadying as purpose took over fear. She wasn't aiming for glory. She wasn't aiming for revenge. She was aiming to keep them alive, every single one of them who trusted her, who had leaned on her in moments of agony. The enemy advance faltered, then broke. What had seemed like a tide of inevitability turned into retreat. The SEAL commander returned to her side, sweat streaking his dust-covered face. For a moment he said nothing. He just placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture heavier than words, before taking back the rifle. "You saved them," he murmured. And for the first time since the shooting began, she realized her hands were no longer shaking. The men gathered around her, not with the cheer of victory, but with quiet reverence. They had always seen her as the medic, the caretaker. But now they saw her as something more, a silent protector, who had crossed the line between healing and fighting not for herself, but for them. That night, as she washed the blood and dust from her hands, she wrestled with the truth. She had taken lives to save lives. The moral weight pressed hard, yet she found a strange peace in knowing it hadn't been for pride or power. It had been for survival, for the chance that those she saved would live to see their families again. Because courage doesn't always look like charging into battle. Sometimes it looks like a healer, forced to become a warrior, when no one else could. And though the echoes of the Barrett's roar would haunt her, she would never forget the commander's silent trust. The moment he looked at her not as just a medic, but as the one who stood between life and death. Because kindness doesn't vanish, it waits, and it finds its way back. And in that battlefield dust, with trembling hands and a rifle too heavy for her frame, kindness had found its way back through her courage. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who believes that ordinary people can carry extraordinary strength. And don't forget, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.